I knew pretty much nothing about this movie going into it, just that it was based off of a series of young adult novels that were similar in style to The Hunger Games. You know, a dystopian world, kids going through life-threatening situations, and so on. Hello, and welcome back to another installment of Film Friday, in which I review a new film every single week. This week we are looking at the 2014 film Maze Runner, directed by Wes Ball and starring Dylan O'Brien. As always, this may contain some spoilers, so consider yourself warned. Let's get into it. While this movie was similar in style to something like The Hunger Games, it did have more of a mysterious element to it. By which I mean, it was not always clear what was going on, but it was clear that something strange was happening. However, I will say that once it was all revealed at the end of the movie, it felt a little anticlimactic. Not as impressive of a conspiracy as it seemed it should have been, given how much lead up there was to it. But to be fair, the final ending scene, which I assume sets up the rest of the series, did make it clear that not everything had been fully answered, and some of the answers that we had been given were not completely correct. But even during the bulk of the film, I felt as though I was missing half of what was going on, because everything was being explained in the vaguest terms possible, which actually made no sense from the perspective of the plot. The protagonist, Thomas, wakes up in an elevator which takes him to a glade in the middle of a giant maze. The glade is full of other kids around his age who are also living there and have formed their own sort of society. The elite members of this group are known as maze runners because it is their job to explore and map out the maze which surrounds them. However, everything about the glade and the maze is presented as some sort of big secret which has to be kept from Thomas. All the other kids know everything about it because they're clearly half explaining everything to him on purpose, but for some strange reason, he's not allowed to know everything about it. I mean, you'd figure he would have to learn all of it eventually in order to live and survive there just like the rest of them did. Also, all the characters were rather weak, and whenever they died, I felt absolutely no emotion towards it whatsoever. And I'm not sure that's how the filmmakers intended the audience to feel in regards to those deaths. But maybe it is. So, story-wise, it was okay, but there was some pretty major need for improvements. From a technical perspective, the camera work was decent, but not always realistic. For instance, there was a particular shot which really stood out and bothered me, to the extent in which I was completely distracted from the scene in which it was used. Towards the beginning of the film, two of the characters are talking on a sort of balcony, and the filmmakers decided to shoot this using a handheld camera suspended in midair off of the balcony, which would have required the cameraman, who's holding the camera handheld, to essentially be floating midair next to the characters. So that was kind of odd, because obviously the use of handheld cameras in cinematography is usually used to bring the audience into the scene with the characters and almost subconsciously convince you that you are there walking alongside them. But if you're supposed to be there floating in midair next to a balcony with nothing to support you, it becomes extremely unrealistic, and it's just a really weird use of handheld cameras. The soundtrack was also okay, but it wasn't that great, and I feel like that sums up this movie pretty well. It was decent, with good entertainment value. You know, it was fun to watch, without there being anything particularly deep, compelling, or original about it. Overall, my rating for The Maze Runner would be a 6 out of 10. It was above average, but not by much. However, I may go and watch the rest of the movies in the series, as I am somewhat curious to see how this story pans out over the rest of those movies. With that being said, thank you for watching. Be sure to comment your own thoughts on this film below, and as always, don't forget to subscribe for more movie commentary and reviews.